Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's the Tech Report podcast. I am your illustrious host, Jordan Drake. I'm just going to own illustrious. I don't know if that's actually true, but I'm just going to roll with it. This is, of course, the official podcast of the Tech Report at techreport.com, the number one place for news and reviews in the computer hardware world. And I'm actually looking at their faces right now. It's kind of fun to call them out here. I'm joined by Scott Wasson, the man in red, by Jeff Gager, the man in the red hoodie, and by Cyril.
He's completely unresponsive, and we're
we're
not sure if he's all right.
He's good. He's hanging in there.
Okay.
It's funny too because if you want to go watch the live stream, which we stream over at techreport.com, we also record the live stream and then play that back later, so you can watch this podcast. You can watch it later. You can listen to it. I think we're working on some sort of a transcription. No, we're not. But I think that the fun part is just watch the expressions of the guys who don't talk a lot, which is usually like Cyril and Jeff, depending on what the conversation is. Just watch the look on Cyril's face. It's that look that says, God, why me? It's that look. It's a good look.
Well, I mean, did you see Jeff last time? He had me beat by a long shot.
That's true. And last time I may or may not have been doing my budget in the background, just to keep the mind active. It's active listening, Scott. No, that's not true. But anyway, oh, look, I just saved money by switching to Geico. Let's start with listener mail. We didn't do this in the last episode, and I was appropriately chastised for it in the 2 comments we got. Seriously, people, give us some more feedback. I'm lonely out here. I need to know people are listening. Please. Anyone?
Our comments now are distributed across the chat room.
I know.
The YouTube comments, the comments on the video posts that we do, and by the time it gets to the audio one that most people consume, that's the big audience, then there's no comments left. I'm sorry, Jordan. It's not they're there. They're just not where they used to be.
I feel like the comedian at the end of a light up for open mic night. How are y'all doing tonight, everyone? So anyway. I'm doing my best over here, folks. But you can email me, keep me company. My email is jdrake@techreport.com, and I may read I might just hold your note close to my heart, and I may also read it on the podcast, which is what's going to happen to these 2 lucky gentlemen who are about to read their emails right now. The first here is from a guy named Marty, and he signs his email by saying, Marty, IBM exec. And you hear that and you think that can't be true. But sure enough, I won't say his last name on the air, nor will we put it in the show notes, but it's in the email he sent us, and I found him. He's on LinkedIn. He is, in fact, an IBM executive. So,
wow.
Scott, we're in the presence of
a future leader of AMD. Isn't that how it works?
Maybe, unclear. But either way, Marty, appreciate you chiming in. Maybe you guys could do something interesting now and again. I don't know. Which is ironic because I used to work for the PR agency that represents IBM, and I actually am aware of a lot of the interesting things they do. Things like Watson, which is pretty cool. But either way, big interesting company to work for, and glad to have him emailing us on the podcast. And he says this. He says, I hope this email finds you all having a great start to 2015. Good start, Marty. I've been an avid listener of the podcast from the first issue and use the Tech Report site as my go-to place for all things PC tech related. Excellent. I find your no-nonsense approach, you're right, we're not funny, nor do we do any nonsense, and views hugely valuable in such a fast-paced environment. I have 2 related questions to test your combined experience. He even writes like an engineer. Okay, number 1. Large TVs rather than PC monitors are clearly improving at pace, with innovations like OLED 4K widescreen displays rapidly heading to an affordable price, with response times and color presentation getting closer to PC monitor specs all the time. Other than some of the obvious limitations of 60 hertz refresh, what's your view on the convergence of the PC monitor and the TV over the next 1 to 2 years? I'm thinking of replacing my current old faithful Dell 30-inch monitor, that's a favorite of ours, with a 40 to 55-inch TV from Samsung or LG. Let's start there. I think this is going to be a Scott, Jeff, and Cyril weigh-in question. Let's see who steps up first to the mic. It's Scott.
Okay. He's right that TVs are becoming interesting with 4K.
Yeah.
It's also the case that monitors are more interesting with variable refresh and all of that. Like PC monitors do higher refresh rates, not just variable. And the other thing that's a little weird about TVs on your desktop, and I totally endorse taking a product that is not designed for one market and like using it for another market, another purpose, another, if it's better or it's cheaper or it's a good way to do it, right? But but having a giant TV on your desktop, like how far away from it are you going to sit? And what is the sweet spot for you in terms of viewing? And how much of it are you really going to see? How much detail are you going to see if you set it way back? Because you've got a 55-inch TV, right? It's not sitting on your desk unless your desk is like super deep, right? Or if it is, like your neck is going to get tired trying to look around at everything. Like it's a little bit of a weird situation. And like the benefit of 4K on the desktop is high pixel density. The benefit on a 55-inch TV is like kind of the same pixel density but a giant screen. It's weird. It's just different. And man, honestly, I don't know. It's just me, but honestly, I think in every case, I would rather have the best desktop monitor that you can get and benefit from the 4K resolutions or whatever that you can get in the context of something designed to sit on my desk than have it on a TV that sits on my desk. But I don't know. I want to hear these other guys' opinions because I think there may be other ways to do it that are interesting, but it's hard for me to embrace them because like I deal with really good PC monitors all the time.
Yeah, I think for me, if I was doing a lot of gaming, it would be more appealing, but the lack of variable refresh kind of hits it in that regard. But the thing I wonder about is, like Windows has enough problems scaling properly on 4K desktop displays, and I wonder if the DPI scaling that's sort of built in would work well when you're dealing with a 4K resolution on such a large panel at whatever kind of viewing distance you'd realistically have on a desktop. And Windows probably not targeting that combination makes it maybe less likely that you're going to get, font scaling and stuff that works well, at least in the kind of the immediate future.
I don't know. We have to do the PPI calculations. Cyril, I'm betting that if you use the bog standard Windows PPI on a 4K monitor or 4K TV, it's like 50 inches, that it would be pretty close to like the DPI that most monitors have been at for years. It would just be a bigger wall, right?
Yeah.
I guess I have to do the math on that, but my sense is, Jeff, that you would be better off in a lot of legacy applications than you are with a 4K desktop monitor with high pixel density because Windows doesn't do a very good job with that. So maybe that is not a bad solution, but I think the question is, what is your goal with your display? Are you trying to work your neck muscles out? Do you want something that like completely encompasses your field of vision and then gives you like extra stuff? Or do you want high pixel density or, all that? I mean, for gaming, honestly, resolution is not that important to me. I think once you get to like 2560 by 1440, you're kind of good for fast twitch stuff unless the monitor's just right in your face. But I think good color reproduction and fast and variable refresh rates are more important for gaming and fast response times. And there's so many cool things coming for 2015, like IPS panels with 120 hertz refresh, variable refresh, FreeSync stuff is coming along with more G-Sync.
Yeah. Actually, let me use that as a segue into the second part of Marty's question. He does say, with the growing adoption of solutions like FreeSync and G-Sync as more effective ways to overcome raster tearing, how do these solutions, if at all, benefit or overcome the issues with multi-GPU stuttering? I'm thinking of buying two GPUs to drive 4K display resolutions, but I don't want to take a step backward. It seems like It seems like 4K is getting ahead of the current single high-end graphics cards on some of the newer, more demanding games, and we may have a couple of years ahead of going back to the requirements of needing a paired set of GPUs to drive the display, and I'm keen to hear how you think this will pan out.
Okay, so I've got some views on that. One is, right now, if you're getting like one of the fastest graphics cards, like a GeForce GTX 980, a Radeon R9 290X, that's single GPU, and you go 4K variable refresh. Variable refresh gets you something that you don't get without it, which is that you can tolerate lower frame rates without the animation feeling less than smooth. So actually, you can kind of get by with one GPU on 4K with variable refresh, whereas if you don't have variable refresh, it's a bad experience still. In some games, it depends on the game and the all of that. But like AAA titles can be difficult with a single GPU. So that's part of it. The other part of it is bigger GPUs are coming. They're actually, I saw a teaser tonight for a AMD has that Radeon fixer guy. Have you ever seen the videos for him? And they had a teaser that said Friday, and it had the fixer on there, and there was a 3 theme in there. So the idea being, I guess, that there will be a 3 related, like Radeon R9 300 series related video maybe coming later this week. So bigger GPUs are coming from AMD apparently, and then I think from NVIDIA too. So I think we'll see single GPU get to the point where 4K looks a lot better soon. And so I don't think it's necessary to go to dual GPU if you're a little bit patient. And given the state of displays and stuff, like, it's probably time to kind of hurry up and wait. We're kind of watching for the FreeSync and G-Sync IPS displays and all of that. So that's part of it. The other part of it about like stutter and stuff like that, and multi-GPU, that is really complicated. Here's the short answer on this. Variable refresh displays are a display technology that fix a problem with display tech that causes a certain type of stutter. It's basically VSync quantization, and then if you have VSync off, it's just that you have this weird like fixed refresh and tearing. That is a great technology that solves a lot of smoothness issues in PC gaming. But if your GPU isn't putting out frames smoothly, you still don't have smooth animation. So those two things are related, but they're not the same, and the way they impact each other is like not all that directly. Except for just that if your GPU is slow at putting out a frame beyond a certain threshold, you're just going to notice it, and variable refresh won't save you from that. So that's part of it. The other thing that's really weird is the issue of multi-GPU alternate frame rendering, where it's like GPU 1 does one frame, GPU 2 does the next, and then they ping-pong back and forth. And then the timing of when frames hit the display. Because like what NVIDIA has done, and now AMD has done it, is this frame metering or frame pacing thing, where to make sure that frames are hitting the display at a regular pace, they actually will delay some frames so that you don't have like 2 frames hit and a long wait and 2 frames hit and a long wait. And so they're kind of making sure it's boom, 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 like that. And with variable refresh, there's an argument that it would be better not to meter your frames, but just to show them when they're ready. Because you do actually mess up when you put a delay in the timing from the game engine, which advances the physics of the world that it simulates at a certain rate. And if you're delaying a frame, then you're messing up on that side. There's a lot of slop in PC gaming. And Jordan, when I got into this whole like frame time thing and said things need to be quantified that way, one of the most amazing things about it was there are a lot of smart people who are game developers who are looking at every frame and saying, how many milliseconds does this effect take? And then there was a bunch of people doing quantification of game performance, and they were all about FPS. And there wasn't really anybody kind of in the middle saying, we need to measure every full frame rendering time and understand it. As a result, things were not engineered around consistent production of frames and delivery of them, and there's a lot of timing slop in the way that the whole PC graphics pipeline works. Different game engines advance their animation timings differently, and there's not really a standard for it. This is starting to get worked out because everybody's paying attention to it. It's important for virtual reality. It's important just for doing the right thing. It's important for taking advantage of higher refresh rates on displays, on and on and on. But it's amazing how much of a mess everything is right now. And I think that the graphics companies and game developers are going to have to work together with everybody in the ecosystem to define some standards to get rid of that timing slop. Because everything was just built around throughput instead of latency. So multi-GPU is not a solved problem, and in the context of high refresh, variable refresh, it gets weird again. And honestly, I need to ask more questions of more people to even understand what the default behaviors are now. I know NVIDIA has some recommendations that are basically like opposing between what you do with the single GPU versus what you do with multi-GPU with frame metering. So it's friggin' weird.
I feel like you're trying to describe this to your therapist. I don't know. I'm trying to figure this out. I'm just conflicted.
What?
Do you know? Yeah, no, Scott, absolutely.
I mean, I think the industry
Scott, these are valid feelings. I think you need to acknowledge your feelings in this area. Don't be afraid to explore them. Let them take you wherever they want to lead you.
Thanks so much.
You're very welcome.
I feel better now.
Thanks to Marty for asking the question, because he's the champion of this topic when it comes to the therapy that we have here live on the show every Thursday night on the Tech Report podcast. The next question is from Solid Punk. He says, "Hi guys, I've noticed a problem with my card's VDDC." Really quickly, what's the VDDC?
Basically voltage.
Something has to do with voltage, Scott says. "I have an HD 7970 reference card, and I tried to undervolt the card from 1.117 to 1.050 or less. It was stable while gaming and other tests, but I noticed that in GPU-Z, VDDC sometimes jumps to 1.498, like for a millisecond or so, and repeats in every 5 or 6 seconds. I didn't notice anything while gaming, but I'm worried about it. First, is it a software bug or a hardware problem? Second, is it okay that I undervolt my card to that amount of voltage? Thanks a lot, guys. I'm a big fan." Boy, that got technical fast.
Yeah, I don't know.
All right, moving on.
I mean, I know I really don't like. Here's the deal. AMD has a thing called PowerTune that does dynamic voltage and frequency scaling and keeps the GPU from overrunning its power limits and all of that. And so voltage and frequency are dynamically being adjusted by this algorithm called PowerTune. And the card's going to do stuff depending on the conditions. I don't know why it's jumping when he's looking at it in GPU-Z. It could be some quirk of his system. It could be that it just works that way. I think that the easy thing is to answer the second question. Is it okay I undervolt my card to that amount of voltage? I don't think undervolting is going to break anything. If the card is stable and if the performance is okay, and you think that you can undervolt to save power, save noise, maybe even prolong the life of the chip, then do it. But if it becomes unstable, then you're going to want to turn it back up. So I don't know, Jeff, Cyril, you guys have any insights other than that?
No.
So I think that's the best answer.
All right, we did our best. Thanks to Solid Punk and Marty for your questions. And the link still works for the questions page. Oh, Google Docs. All right, we will be taking. Sorry, your son Scott is being an excellent moderator, and I'm doing my best to keep up with his approach here, which is that later in the show, later in the show, we'll answer some questions straight from the chat room. So for those that like the interchange with us more immediately next time you listen to the show, assuming that those who are listening now to a podcast or a pre-recorded version, just join us live and you can ask questions live. So we'll do that in a little bit. Let's take a quick break from that and start with our first story of the episode, which is that TR subscribers are going to get an early access to Homeworld Remastered Beta. Now, this sounds pretty darn cool. This is, of course, Gearbox Software putting together this game that we talked about a while back. It looks super exciting, and TR readers are getting in on the inside loop for this. And Scott, this is your story. How did you pull this off?
I know a guy at Gearbox, and so he's a longtime reader of the site and kind of running the Homeworld thing, and wanted to do something for the TR community, and kind of came up with this possible concept, talking with them, and this is a great thing for them because they get beta testers, and it's a great thing for us because we get to give our subscribers a little extra perk that they wouldn't have had otherwise. And it's a pretty good deal, because if you participate in the beta, and of course they're asking you to spend some time playing the multiplayer version of Homeworld Beta, then you get a copy of the game from Gearbox when it's released. So the whole Homeworld Remastered collection. So this is something that what we actually kind of had to do on the download, because the game wasn't officially announced, and now we can talk about it. And what we've done is we actually have just today announced this publicly, because the game came out, where the game was announced last weekend at PAX South, right?
Yeah.
And we've extended the deadline for people who are subscribers to sign up. And so if you're not a subscriber yet, it's too late to get in on this, okay? This is for existing subscribers. But if you're an existing subscriber to the Tech Report for any amount, silver or gold, whatever you pay, just pay what you want, then you can click on the link in this post. You can go to the forum thread in the Smoky Back Room. You can get instructions on how to sign up for the beta and participate in that, and then get a copy of the game. So it's a pretty cool deal. I'm happy to be able to do it, and happy to be able to give our best supporters a little something extra, in addition to all the other stuff that you get when you subscribe, all the site-based features, the 20% or more off on Macrium, Reflect, all of that stuff. So this is just one additional perk. And if you miss this, the thing to be said is, go ahead and subscribe now, so that next time when we do something cool, if it has to be done ahead of time behind the scenes, you don't miss out.
It's funny, because I made a mistake just now. I was thinking in my head of Battleborn, which we have talked about and is an upcoming Gearbox game. And then it took me a second to realize now we're talking about a remake of the classic Homeworld game, which now actually makes me even more excited, because this looks freaking awesome.
And Jordan, just let me know. We'll get you in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hook me up, bro.
So I don't think it'll run on your Mac, though. You got to get that gaming PC going.
Yeah, I mean, if I can find time, when I'm not clubbing in New York City,
clubbing seals,
just tearing out the dance floor and just collecting numbers left and right, son. That's how I do.
Did you get any snow at all? Did you?
We got. It was a measly 7 inches, which is what she said. But no, we were promised 21 to 24. We were promised a lot, and it was not. It was very disappointing. And I was looking forward to I was looking forward to a bit of a snow apocalypse. I wanted some sort of a dune situation with biker gangs roaming along that I had to protect myself from, and maybe some snowball fights with some unsuspecting neighbors in a fun, post-holiday snow capade. And it was none of that. It was just 7 inches of snow. And then I went to work the next day, and I walked to work uphill both ways.
Yeah, but at least you had that.
At least I had that. But no, it was a little disappointing. And Long Island got a lot, and Boston got walloped. But New York City kind of missed it.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know. When you guys get snow, it's national news. When I get snow, it's January. it's just.
That's fair. But I think this is technically a blizzard.
Yeah,
and,
but I mean, seriously, you wouldn't know if it snowed here. Like, if it snowed 30 inches in Missouri, you wouldn't know that it snowed in Missouri. Right? No,
because we're just the better ones.
Apparently, it's amazing.
We're more important, Scott. New York City is the center of civilization as we know it today. You have barbecue, and that's kind of it. No, I'm teasing. But you're right, absolutely right, that New York City tends to be very... Well, it's funny because it's either New York City or, as I recall, a friend of mine who went to Auburn in Alabama said that, they would call it a blizzard if they got like 2 inches of snow in various places that didn't normally get snow. So it's everywhere it's relative. But either way, yeah, it wasn't very exciting. And I'm sure your kids love it, Scott, when you get 30 inches. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, we really actually have had a very snow-poor winter. And it's kind of disappointing. I get a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. And so I actually want some snow. Besides which, my commute is like I walk down the steps over there. And so it's not like it's an inconvenience to have snow,
Yeah.
But, man, we talk about this. The worst thing is if my kids, if they get like a snow day, that means they're at home and their teacher emails their homework to them. I was like, no, technology has ruined everything.
Oh, man, that really sucks.
Yeah.
Talk about just taking the joy out of childhood.
Oh, man, it's not cool.
That's no fun at all. Let's move on here. Windows 10 build 9926 adds Cortana, Continuum, and more. Now, Cortana is this AI that has been touted on a lot of the Windows phones. I've never used Cortana. I've heard good things. They love to show these different ads where Cortana can solve problems that Google's thing and Siri can't do. I don't know what Google. What does Google call their personal assistant?
Google Now,
I think technically, yeah.
It doesn't have like an anthropomorphic name.
No, it's actually, now that I think about it, it's a little weird. You'd think maybe
that's sad. It doesn't have a name.
Kind of sad. What if it was like Google Sergey? No, that would be very interesting. But anyway, so Cortana, which of course, like, I feel like when Halo first came out, and Cortana, of course, is the female AI character from Halo, and arguably a really great video game character, and one that a lot of gamers will relate to as someone that was involved in the Halo and Halo 2 and some of these really classic games from Bungie and Microsoft and on the Xbox. If you had said to me at the time, oh yeah, actually Microsoft's going to use this as the name of an AI in an upcoming version of Windows and or on mobile phones, I would have been like, yeah, that's a joke. Like, that's a gag. That's an April Fool's video. That's a CES stunt. Sure enough, Cortana is the name of their little cloud-based AI. And Cyril, how are they working it into the desktop operating system? What's that going to look like?
Well, it's just basically a field in the start bar, essentially, taskbar. You just press the button and you can ask a question. I haven't actually had time to test the new build yet, so I haven't seen it firsthand. But that's been in the works for a while. We saw some earlier builds where it was a little bit less polished. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of an interesting thing because Apple. Well, as far as I'm aware, you still don't really have technically Siri in OS 10, do you? I mean, you do have some voice recognition stuff.
Yeah,
like
not a lot.
Text to speech or the reverse, but you don't have like a digital assistant that you can just ask anything. So that's yeah, for once, Microsoft is actually innovating a little bit, which is nice.
They copied the two leading mobile operating systems for the desktop before Apple did. That's the scope of their innovation, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Okay, let's just make sure that we get that right.
Can I suggest that there is nothing more trite in the technology world than making fun of companies for introducing features that other companies have done variations of?
I mean, he said innovation, man.
But we're in such an iterative age. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's going to be a long time before someone's going to have the next mouse and keyboard. It's like AI or, VR. And I'm not, as the British would say, Scott, I'm not having a go at you, but this is something I think about a lot. Like, I feel like people who love Android love to talk about how iOS copied from Android. And people who love iOS love to talk about how Android copied from iOS.
Yeah, that gets tired. Yeah.
And it's like, and then people who love Windows want to talk about how Windows copied for, how Mac. It's like, yeah, of course. Like, we live in this age where everyone's just tweaking, and it's not about who has this feature and no one else has it. It's who has the best version of that feature, who has the best implementation. So I'm more interested in, is Cortana a way smarter AI? Is it bounds ahead? Is it just kind of mediocre and interesting? Is it just sort of kind of like Siri, but a little more intelligent? Like Amazon Echo comes out. Now that's a little more interesting because it's from Amazon. And I actually got an invitation to buy Amazon Echo because I signed up for it, but I didn't jump on that. Maybe I should have. Maybe I let you guys down by not buying it. But I feel like we're gonna be at this we're gonna be at this age where Tesla's not gonna come up with the next most amazing vehicle. They're just gonna make the next version of the Tesla main car, which can go from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. It's like just little steps here and there. I don't know. I don't know if this is a pointless rant, but I just feel like that's the era we're in.
Yeah. I think that a lot of things are iterative and a lot of things are obvious in terms of additional directions and things. I also think that it's kind of sad the state of Windows compared to iOS and Android on a lot of fronts. Notifications and touch interface. Good God, man. And this is one of them.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's true.
And yes, Windows for the most part, of course, it's supposed to serve all purposes in Microsoft's vision. For the most part, it's planted at the desk. But, nobody has advanced the PC platform to the point where we have fingerprint readers when we log in everywhere. They should be ubiquitous. They are on phones. The high-end phones now. They all have them. These things are like the desktop's taking a back seat. And Microsoft isn't pushing very hard on new features. We are in an iterative world, but we're also in a world where the desktop operating system has been neglected. And we we have significant innovations in the leading mobile operating systems that have just been left out. So I'm happy to see this come in, but also like, the power to do really good voice recognition has been in a desktop long before they could stream it and do it in the cloud on a local on a phone. And
do we know if Windows 10 will analyze your voice locally and not require a cloud connection?
I don't know, but I'm just saying that it could have been done first.
Well, and I'm bringing this up legitimately because that's one of my biggest frustrations with Siri was before Siri, people may or may not remember that there was this version of iOS that would let you tell it what to do. You could say next song, call this person, and it was entirely local to the iPhone. It was much faster than Siri because it didn't require an internet connection, and so I loved that because for the few things I used it for, like walking along and wanting to call someone, it was almost always accurate and very quick. And it didn't call itself Siri because remember, Siri was an acquisition of a third-party company.
Yeah.
But to that point, if I'm going to have the power of a desktop, I think it makes sense that while I could connect to the cloud to maybe update the syntax about what it learns about me, I would really hope they build something in where it's like this doesn't have to just be on the cloud. It could be a local hub of what's in the cloud to analyze, and sort of hear what you're saying. I don't know. Now I'm just being picky, but
anyway.
I
mean, the truth is that the desktop power envelope is like 100 watts on the CPU roughly, and you've got maybe a GPU that maybe has its own power envelope. You have vastly more memory. You've got wired instead of wireless connectivity. You've got more of everything, more memory, more everything, and you should be able to put new features first into the desktop operating system.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, that's not been where the innovation has happened lately. So this feels like catch-up. That's what I'm saying.
Sure. Understood.
Anyway, we should probably move on to the next one. We got a lot of Windows stuff that Microsoft announced.
Yeah, I got about 3 or 4 more rants on the hopper we're going to get to in just a little bit. Windows 10 will be a free upgrade for the first year. Jeff, this is your story. Quickly, what does this mean?
It's exactly what you said. So if you've got Windows 8 right now, or Windows 8.1 presumably, because you get a free upgrade to that. For the first year after the release of Windows 10, you get an upgrade to that operating system for free, which is great. I mean, it's something I think a lot of people were hoping Microsoft was going to do, just because Windows 10 doesn't so much look like a whole new operating system as kind of what Windows 8 should have been. So it's kind of something that I think Microsoft was maybe forced into, and also looks like DirectX 12 is going to be exclusive to Windows 10, so it at least provides a free upgrade path to that for people who already have Windows 8. So I think it was a good move by them. They were sort of a little bit weird with the language when they talked about it during the actual live stream of their announcement, talking about Windows being a service, but later confirmed that this is actually not. They're not changing the business model at all. So this isn't a deal where for the first year it's free and then you've got sort of a subscription fee on top of that afterwards. They want to treat Windows more like a service in the way that they actually issue updates to it, and it seems like they want to have kind of this one operating system on one version of the operating system that as many Windows clients as possible are running. I think probably for application and sort of developer purposes, and getting more Windows 10 devices instead of having kind of a patchwork of Windows 10 and Windows 8 and 8.1 and Windows 7. So
there's 2 stories here that also have to do with Windows. One suggests that you'll be able to stream games from your Xbox One to the PC. The other is that you can stream games from the PC to the Xbox One, which is a really interesting idea, sort of connecting the living room with the desktop in the gaming sense. Cyril, this is your story. Without diving too much into what the story is suggesting, because I think we can all understand this idea that you play a game on your Xbox and then stream it to your PC so you can play it off your PC and vice versa. I guess I have a suspicion or a feeling like this is going to be these kinds of streaming things, which everyone seems to be wanting to do. NVIDIA's got their streaming platform. Steam's trying to do a lot of streaming. And I recognize there's a difference between streaming within the home versus streaming off the cloud. But I feel like this is going to be a lot of, you have to have just the right router at just the right speeds and have it configured just the right way. And it's going to be a latency headache for the longest time. Am I being pessimistic needlessly, or is this legitimately something that that could be really cool and that we're excited about, or am I sort of being glass half empty for good reason?
I don't know. I think you'll want to ask Jeff that. I think he's actually tested home streaming stuff. But
that's true, Jeff. You have. But go ahead, Cyril.
No, actually, Jeff is probably.
Oh, that was unofficial.
Yeah, no,
I'm sorry.
like Jeff and I have totally
done
done this multiple different ways, and like Cyril hasn't. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I looked at the by section, as far as written by, and I did the old Jordan Drake move, which is Cyril, this is your story.
Right.
So I'm going to do this. Jeff, this is your area of expertise.
But yeah, no, the streaming stuff, I mean, I haven't used the Windows streaming from an Xbox, but the Shield streaming that you can do with sort of a GeForce graphics card, and either the Shield tablet or the Shield handheld, that works fine over Wi-Fi. You will need, if you want a wireless connection, a reasonably fast connection. You probably want to be on a 5 gigahertz band. I had some success with a sort of a non-approved router, but it was definitely a better experience with one of these sort of game stream ready routers that NVIDIA tests and certifies. But if you're using a wired connection, its latency isn't going to be an issue at all. So I wouldn't expect any need for a fancy router or anything if you've got a gigabit or probably even, like a fast Ethernet connection that's going to give you consistently low latency and probably enough bandwidth for sort of 1080p at 60 frames per second, maybe even. So
yeah,
I think there's certainly the potential for this to be a solution that works very well from kind of a technical standpoint with a wired connection.
Yeah, and you don't I've done it wireless with both the Shield stuff and then the Steam home streaming, and on a 5 gigahertz router. That's it's an Asus Dark Knight approved router, right? So I do have that, Jordan, but it's really quite good as long as you aren't playing the kind of game that demands super fast input. Like I tried Grid, where you're racing.
Yeah.
And it's like you're drunk, like you're running into stuff. It's no good. But then I played like Wolf Among Us, and where it's like kind of just a little graphic adventure thing, and it's like absolutely perfect for that. So it depends on the game. Like Skyrim, where the combat is super like terrible anyway, and all you're doing is really walking around and talking to people, like is fine over that type of connection. So it just depends on the game.
Yeah.
But the thing that Jeff wrote, the story here that I want to kind of talk about, which is
holographic.
Well, no, Microsoft rolls out this they teased about, we're going to talk about gaming, and then they roll out this thing and they talk about their gaming features for Windows 10. And Jeff, I think your headline was
right.
And it's just a great summation. Windows 10's gaming features are mostly about Xbox, right? Because they didn't really, Jordan, start by talking about the possibility of streaming from your PC to the Xbox.
That was kind of an afterthought.
That was like we're definitely thinking about that. In other words, they said nothing. Right?
Right.
But what they demonstrated and committed to doing is streaming from the Xbox to the PC. So if the good graphics you have locally are too good and you want to slowly bring in bad graphics, then we can do that. So Jeff, like, what else? I mean, there were some other features, right?
The only thing that's really, I mean, they've got a new Xbox app if you want to, if you want a new version of games for Windows Live, basically. The game recording is kind of interesting. They've got kind of an always-on DVR that'll record the last 30 seconds, something that you can get with other software and even NVIDIA's drivers with Shadow Play. So they're not really doing anything new there. The gaming stuff is kind of DirectX 12, which we all knew was coming, and then this Xbox app and like these 30-second replay. Like even the DVR functionality is not as robust as what you can do with NVIDIA's Shadow Play stuff right now, where you can actually set it to record, I think, up to 20 minutes, the last 20 minutes of footage automatically. So it's something that they've added, but yeah, it doesn't strike me as it's not the Windows gaming news I was hoping for.
Yeah, and if we would have gotten the Windows gaming news we were hoping for, we wouldn't have believed it, because we've gotten that news in various forms over the years that never worked out, right? But this time it was like just more of a kind of a slap. It was like, oh, this is just about Xbox, really. Anyway, Jordan, let's go ahead. We'll talk about this Windows holographic stuff, because this is more interesting than...
It certainly has been getting a lot more headlines.
Well, it's who wrote this up? Jeff, you wrote this up.
Yeah.
So, how is this different from an Oculus? What are we doing here?
Well, the weird part is they're calling it holographic, which kind of didn't make sense to me initially. So it's basically a form of augmented reality, where it's using virtual holograms, and you wear this kind of headset where it's got a lens on it that you can see through, and then there are also images projected. I'm not sure exactly how the the image actually show up on that lens, but it sort of overlays these virtual holograms or 3D objects into whatever you see through the lens. So it kind of reminds me a little bit of the cast AR VR stuff that came, or augmented reality stuff that was, I think, originally started at Valve. So this is not really at all like Oculus in the sense that you're putting yourself inside a virtual world. This kind of brings virtual elements into the real world, sort of through these goggles.
Yeah, and so one of the demos is Minecraft, and it's like you're sitting in your living room making Minecraft happen, which is pretty cool. Although, like the pictures, they're just mock-ups because they're not even showing from the inside of the thing. But I guess people who used it were pretty impressed.
Yeah, the demos are apparently people were thought it was really, really cool. And I can kind of see I'm having a harder time envisioning where this goes and kind of like a day-to-day computing context. But as a display technology for doing kind of 3D manipulation or modeling, or they're talking about working with NASA to do sort of exploring 3D or sort of virtual 3D Mars that's been created from images that were actually taken by the Mars rover. Stuff like that, I think it has really interesting applications. And it's just a question of what kind of, what's the end form factor of this that actually makes it useful on a day-to-day sort of consumer perspective, because the headset looks a little bit unwieldy. This is not something you're going to be wearing around all the time. It's much bulkier than something like Google Glass, but if you get it down to that form factor and have sort of virtual holograms overlaid wherever you want in your field of view, then it becomes really interesting.
Yeah. Now I'm kind of wondering, like, Oculus seems to me like an obvious thing because I've tried it. You put the headset on, you're in VR, and like you have an amazing experience where you're playing a game. It's more depth and realism than playing a game in front of a fixed display. This is like a different category, like you said. So the question is, what are you going to do with it, and how many people want that? And I guess for some types of games like Minecraft, it makes a lot of sense, and definitely if you're modeling and stuff, it makes sense. But I don't know whether this becomes a mass market thing. The other thing is, I guess his GPU and CPU are integrated in the headset, and we don't have a price for that, right?
Yeah. I think the demo units, they might have had that part of it actually hang around like a little neck-mounted kind of unit. So I don't know exactly if the final plan is to have everything in the headset or not. But there wasn't a whole lot of detail on exactly what they're doing. I mean, they're talking about having a high-end CPU and GPU, which doesn't strike me as the kind of thing that you can fit into a headset.
Yeah, so. The word high-end is just a lie. There's two words, both lies, or at least one of them.
I'm watching the launch video for this now, and I don't know. I really want this to be a thing, but like, did Surface ever become a real thing?
Well, this is the kind of thing. Have you seen Black Mirror, where they sort of?
Yeah, I've seen Black Mirror.
So you've got sort of those contact lenses where you sort of have everybody has augmented reality through contact lenses. In that context, if you actually had or were wanted to wear or could easily wear something where this would be possible, I think it's really, really interesting. But yeah, the day-to-day is just, it's a really neat technology, and it kind of came out of nowhere during the presentation. I don't think anybody expected this.
Yeah.
It's kind of been one of the most interesting things that Microsoft has done in a long time.
It's definitely it's definitely got the attention for being, revolutionary. Not revolutionary, but certainly an interesting step for them.
So in like 2 years, Apple will figure out how to sell this to people.
Well, you know what? I think the big test of the most recent example of that is certainly going to be the Apple Watch of whether or not Apple can make wearables work. And some of the rumors about the battery life for the Apple Watch really concern me. I don't know if I can really keep. I don't know. My daily ritual that involves bowing to an effigy of Steve Jobs, I'm just not sure if I can continue that if the watch disappoints, because I just don't know if I can maintain the illusion of the religion that I hold so closely to. But we'll see. Actually, my religion's doing really well. Apple results are at a record high.
I think I saw people reporting this is the biggest profit any company has ever made.
Ever.
That's a lot. $18 billion. Yeah. 18.
Well, yes, 18 net. Yes, correct. Net income. Yeah, it's and what's amazing to me is the growth rate I think it's 30% up year over year, which is just an insane amount to me.
It was they sold a ton of new iPhones is basically what it comes down to, which is I think we summarized it in the staff chat room as people don't want big phones, and then they like figured it out and they changed and it got a lot better. But it's not just that, right? It has to be a miracle of logistics just to make that many phones happen, and they had to make a big bet, because if this didn't go over well, then they probably were stuck with a lot of phones. Yeah, they were probably, but they, Tim Cook has been kind of about that, like throwing the billions around to secure the supply, and then having that supply chain just ramped up and really go. And they caught the iPhones were hot in the Christmas season. Everybody wanted one, and almost everybody who did could get one, and that was a big deal. So, I don't know, Jeff. I know you're excited. Our resident Apple fan.
Hey, they're really, really good at making money.
I don't know, Cyril. Are you still with the iPhone 5? You still holding out?
Yeah, I mean it still works fine. I see no reason to upgrade.
Okay, there you go.
No, and I'm at the 5S, and I won't upgrade till the next cycle either. I didn't see enough to really make me move to the next level. I did, of course, recently buy that iPad Mini, which I really enjoyed. I bought it with the intention that I was going to do a lot more reading, and that's happened.
Really?
No.
Okay.
I was like, I'm going to buy it, and it's going to help me read better, and I'm going to be more educated. And I was like, oh, Vainglory, that looks like a cool game. And then my life went away. I'm going to take a quick second here to say, and I won't go too far down this rabbit hole, but just for the record, when I was like, when we started this podcast, when I was 16, 17, 18, 15, however young I was, I was a big fan of Apple, and I was a big fan of Steve Jobs, and I watched every keynote, and I was always hoping that Apple's going to release new stuff, and I was very much just in the moment. And I still like Apple, and I love to be their apologist on this show, but for the most part, my expectations and understanding of what they offer in the marketplace is pretty realistic, and I don't have the sort of glow that I used to have around them. I have transferred my love and affection. I've transferred my stalker's tendencies towards Tesla and Elon Musk. I don't know why, but in the past few months, I've decided that Elon Musk is like the savior of mankind. And I'm being totally serious. I think he is the coolest person on this planet. And I think he is a person who in 100 or 200 years could very likely be in the likes of Einstein, Edison, Tesla, and the people who built the world we live in today. I don't know if it's just good PR. I don't know if I'm just drinking a lot of Kool-Aid, but the guy's like, he wants to freaking get us to Mars, and I think he can pull it off. I think he's got an electric car that's freaking amazing. I don't know. I've got a lot of, I've switched from like what I used to be like slight fascination to like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then now it's just like, I see these, I see the whole SpaceX demo where a recent test where they sent the pod up to the International Space Station. And the idea was to bring one of the rockets down and land it on, the floatable barge. And it didn't work. It failed. And Musk just goes, close but no cigar. We'll get it next time. And I'm just like, this is a leader. I don't know. Maybe it's the PR part of me that's responding to how well he handled that. But either way, I'm on board. So,
I guess so.
I'm on board.
I mean,
I gotta.
We all like PayPal so much, right? We're big fans of PayPal.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's where he started,
right? I don't loop PayPal
right?
into that. I think I'm thinking more about space.
I guess like
I'm getting a lot of crap for this in the comments, of course. Because,
he's doing some interesting stuff. I'll give that to him, and if he nails, he's quite ambitious.
Yeah,
he strikes me as like he's got a little bit of Tony Stark in him.
Oh, that's exactly why I'm so impressed with him.
So,
I think let me put it in a more realistic term and take some of the hyperbole out of it. Here's what I think is that there's a lot of people in this world who are really, really rich and are using their wealth to make the world a better place. Bill Gates is doing a great job of that, eliminating malaria, working on vaccines, funding projects to turn poop into water, into fuel. I mean, like really cool stuff. And I'm a big fan of Gates, and I think that's a true story. And I know it sounds funny, but it's a true story. So I think, and I think Bill Gates' PR is fantastic. The way he communicates, the way he talks about his innovations. So Bill is high on my list. But there's something about Elon Musk, and I think it's the fact that he's young and he's capable and he's smart. Like he'll do things where obviously he's working with a team, but a lot of it comes from his own head. Like he's a smart guy. And I think he's at that place where he has the money and the resources to say, I don't care if it's profitable now. I'm going to get the other people who have money and put it into things that need to be important to us in 30 years, like getting to Mars, like getting to low Earth orbit with rockets that can come down and land by themselves. And the way that that story has been told through the YouTube videos they release and the transparency they generally have around when things go right and when they go wrong suggests a company that is sort of the closest we have to like the era of Star Trek, which is this idea that we just want to explore for the benefit of exploring and for the good of all mankind, and that's what we're doing it for. And yeah, there's money at the end of the rainbow, certainly lots of it, particularly if you start mining asteroids and all that kind of stuff. Not that Musk is doing that. My point is like it just seems like he's really someone who's thinking in a way that a lot of people aren't, and he's putting the money and the resources and the can do behind it in a way that people haven't, and the way that certainly NASA has always tried to, but has a hard time doing because of the bureaucracy and the cost and what goes into the way governments generally do things. So that's my speech. All hail Elon Musk, and we can move on.
All right.
All right.
All right. So details. Let's talk about another company that's really reaching for the stars. Details leak out on AMD's first Zen-based desktop CPUs. Cyril, this is your story.
Yeah, I mean, this is all very much unofficial, and I think I saw a story recently that said, well, today, that said we probably are not going to see these until like Q3 of 2016. So it's still kind of a long ways off. But yeah, I mean, this is hold on, let me pull up the story here. So yeah, I mean, this is supposed to be, well, I mean, this is AMD's next major CPU architecture after Bulldozer. Everything they have right now, while it may not technically be called Bulldozer, is based on the same sort of architecture that they released, several years ago. Zen is supposed to be something completely new. I think Sweet Clockers said it has more of a like an Intel-like architecture, an Intel-like design with symmetric multi-threading instead of the current thing AMD has, where you have two integer cores and shared FPU. So they would be sort of steering back toward the more conventional design that they had before. I mean, and then adding SMT to that. But aside from that, it's supposed to be built on a 14 nanometer process. It's supposed to be to fit, in thermal envelopes up to 95 watts. So again, similar to what Intel has out in the market today. DDR4 memory, which I assume will be standard in 2016. Integrated PCI Express 3.0, again, similar to what Intel is doing right now, and a new FM3 socket, which suggests that this will be a consumer chip, probably something with integrated graphics. Although the Switchlocker said, there's no mention of an IGP in there yet. So, this is all very much unofficial, and we don't know a whole lot yet. But it's sort of interesting to see where AMD might be heading. Like I guess, yeah, a little more than a year away. So there you go.
Exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, forget going to Mars. Zen-based desktop CPUs. Let's make it happen, baby. Scott, this next story is yours. NVIDIA admits and explains the GeForce GTX 970 memory allocation issue. Bring us up to speed on this problem that we've been tracking in the forum, and then obviously we have NVIDIA's sort of response to the whole issue.
Yeah, well, there's actually a couple articles we could probably. I just brought up here on the other one. This is kind of, it started in the forums because people noticed some behavior on their own GeForce GTX 970 graphics cards, where the card did not appear when you're playing games and when you're in a situation where you're near the end of using all of its memory. They noticed that it didn't use all the memory. Looks like it tended to stop at about 3.5 gigabytes. And they compared it to a GeForce GTX 980, which is based on the same chip, but is a full implementation of that chip. And they found that the 980 used more memory. And then, and this, there's a thread in our forums with this, some people started using this little benchmarks written in CUDA. It's a GPU type thing to test memory bandwidth. And what they found was that with the GTX 970, the memory bandwidth that they measured above about 3.5 gigabytes was a lot lower than on 980. Like it would be comparable going up toward that 3.5 gig limit, and then it would drop on the 970 sooner than on the 980. Now both of these cards were spec'd as 4 gig cards with 256-bit memory interfaces, and yet they're behaving very differently. And so the question is why? And so NVIDIA first came out, you know what happened with this, Jordan? Like, this was kind of brewing in the background, and then they released the GeForce GTX 970 just recently, and once, or 960 just recently, which is a lower end card and an even lower end chip. Once that was out of the way, then they started dealing with this. It's like on a Saturday morning, I had to step into the office and write up the story about the 970, and they actually admitted that there's a difference between the 970 and the 980 on the way that they allocate memory. And they have a little statement on it, which is, I've got it up on the screen here, about how basically they segment the GTX 970's memory into two chunks, a 3.5 gig chunk and a 0.5 gig chunk. And they basically say that in a sort of vague fashion, because of fewer crossbar resources, that you can't get to that small 1/2 gig chunk on the 970 as fast. And then they offered some benchmark data that sort of showed that when you do have to get into the situation where you use that last 0.5 gigabytes of memory, that relative to the 980, the performance drop from a configuration where you didn't do that to where you did, like you raised the screen resolution or whatever, the performance drop was only a few percentage higher. And people sort of scratched their heads and said, what is going on here? And we have, I think, 248 comments on that story. And so that followed. What followed then was NVIDIA actually called me up on a Sunday and decided to talk to Jonah Albin, who's Senior VP of GPU engineering at NVIDIA, one of their head guys in charge of developing their GPU hardware, about the 970 configuration. And what he said was basically that when they shipped this card, they had some specs, including the number of ROPs and the sort of way the memory was configured, and all of this that weren't really correct, basically. And he said that they built a feature into this chip that the people who came up with like the reviewer's guide and the specifications and put them out there in front of the world were not aware that the feature was being used and what its implications were for the actual configuration and performance of the GTX 970. Now this gets super complicated in a hurry, but I'm going to try to explain the basics because it's probably worth doing because this is a weird story. So the first thing to say is that both of these cards, the 970 and the 980, are built on the same chip. And Jordan, you're maybe aware of this. I'm not sure how aware of this you are. So help me out here. When you have a 980 based on like the full-fledged GM204 GPU, right? And you're shipping a bunch of those. Some of the chips that come out of the fab are not everything on them is going to work perfectly. Either there are units that simply have flaws in them where they don't work, or units where they need more voltage than you want to give them in order for them to work, or something like that.
Right.
And so what GPU companies have done for years is make cut-down versions of their products. They call this die harvesting, where they take the chips that aren't perfect and they disable some of the units that may be troubled, and then they ship those into the market for less money, and they have less stuff enabled.
Weren't there Tri-Core Phenom That was the story there.
Yeah. This happens in lots of different ways. The different cache sizes you get in different Ivy Bridge, Sandy Bridge, Haswell chips. That has to do with maybe there are sections of the cache that aren't good. Although Intel actually does some other things with their cache too, so that may not be the best example. But different core counts, different amounts of resources, and in GPUs, this is a common practice. If you have a GTX 970, it doesn't mean you have a broken chip. It just means that you have a chip where NVIDIA has very intentionally selectively disabled portions of that chip because either it wasn't perfect or they just wanted to sell more widgets at a lower price. In some cases, people have gone into firmware and like tweaked to turn on some units in some places, like the tri-core phenoms. They're able to turn those into quads in some cases, and it was really actually maybe those cores worked okay, but AMD needed to lower prices and didn't want to kill the sales of the high-end ones, so they disabled a core and shipped it. So anyway, the 970s are a die-harvested version of the GM204 chip, and they have bits disabled. And it turns out that one of the things that they built into the Maxwell architecture that was not in the prior generation Kepler architecture was this ability to basically disable a portion of the L2 cache that is on the chip that is sort of fronts a memory controller in the way the chip is architected. And those L2 caches are oftentimes, like, some of them will be bad, and they have like multiple partitions here. And on Kepler, if you had a bad section of L2 cache, they would have to disable a lot of things. They'd have to disable basically 1/4 of the chip's ROP units, memory controllers, L2 cache, and memory interfaces. And so you have products like, what was it, the GeForce GTX 660 Ti, I think, that are basically like, they were the old GK104 chip with the 192-bit memory interface instead of 256-bit, where they had selectively disabled a quarter of the memory subsystem because of a bad cache. When they built Maxwell, they built in a feature where they could selectively disable basically half of a cache partition, or 1/8 of the total level 2 cache in the chip if it was bad. And they'd still be able to access all like 4 gigs of memory, but the problem is, when you turn off the L2 cache, you lose one of the internal connections to this like switch fabric on the chip that connects the L2 caches to the shader core. And when that happens, you lose bandwidth. And so they have this funky thing where they have a configuration where they ship this card and they segment the memory into 2 segments. And you've got the 3.5 gig, the 7 lower memory controllers, all sort of working together in parallel to access memory. And then you got this other slower segment where the L2 cache is disabled and the crossbar interconnect is disabled. And if you want to access that, you can get there, but it's relatively slow. And so this, I don't know, I'm not getting into all the technicalities. The article will explain about how they stride across 1K blocks to distribute data across the 7, or in the case of GTX 988 memory controllers, so that all of them can be accessed in parallel when data is read sequentially. You don't get that with the smaller partition. There's a lot going on there. The crux of it is that we didn't know about this when the product shipped, and it's not what people expected that they were getting. Now, we reviewed this card, Jordan, and we tested its performance in a number of different configurations, a number of different situations, a number of different games, and the GTX 970 is a fast video card that is a good deal for the price. But the specs are not what you thought. And actually, this has some additional ramifications. The way that this is configured, there's actually, with the L2 cache being disabled, there's less ROP throughput, which means less pixel fill rate, less anti-aliasing power than originally was thought. And it's just a little bit messy because, and Jonah Albin told me, he said, we screwed up. This is messy because NVIDIA did not communicate well the specs of the card when they launched it. And so they're coming out now, and they're being I think, very forthright. I think they're telling us pretty much how it really works now. But the implications of it are just a little bit frustrating for people who bought the card thinking they were getting one thing and found out they're getting something else. Now, performance-wise, there is an issue of what happens when you go beyond 3.5 gigs and you need to use that last half gigabyte on a GTX 970. And pretty much what you're going to get is you get 7/8 of the bandwidth in that lower 3.5 gig segment, and you get 1/8 of the bandwidth in the upper half gig segment, and so it's slow. Jonah Albin contended when I talked to him that even though it was slow, that it was faster to have that half gig on the card and access it when you needed it than to spill out of memory, because then you're going over PCI Express into system memory. That's the next thing that happens, right? So they have the big segment, they have the little segment, and then PCI Express. In a GTX 980, you just have a big segment and then PCI Express. But in this case, he was saying, look, this configuration with the slower half gig memory partition is still superior to a card that just has 3.5 gigabytes. So we think that's good. And again, they're sort of maintaining that the performance impact of it is not that great. The other thing that they've said is that they can use some heuristics in their drivers to store data in the last half gig partition that may be necessary, but isn't accessed commonly. And so the idea is kind of that you try to watch the way that memory is being used, store certain things. I think he mentioned bitmaps as one of the possibilities, but I'm not sure that's a really great candidate or not. But you store some stuff in there that you may not need very often, so you don't have the most demanding or frequently accessed data in that last half gigabyte. But it's there if you need it, and it's better than going over PCI Express. So that's kind of their take. It's what they were trying to do here, I think, was clearly prevent people from getting too upset, because they sold, like, Jordan, I think they sold nearly 2 million 970 and 980 cards. They have really had a big success, and now they have a lot of people who own these things and are finding out this isn't what I thought. And so I think this is it's a liability for them. And I kind of have two minds about it. I think that it's true that they didn't communicate well at first. I think they should have communicated well at first. I also think it's true that the product that we reviewed performed like it did when we reviewed it, and after knowing all this, it performs the same. Right? Now you can look for particular scenarios where, like with 4K and certain games that have lots of textures and a big memory footprint, there may be situations where between the 970 and the 980, the 970 suffers in performance because of this memory config. So that's not great, but I think those situations are going to be relatively rare. And I'd have to burn a lot of time. I think people are expecting me to burn a lot of time testing all this. And I'll tell you what, I've been working on another project so far. I haven't yet done that. But it is an interesting question. How much of a sort of marginal performance difference is there between like a 970 and a 980 because of this config in the places where you push and you find problems? Because, and how common are they? And so I don't know the answer to that. The other thing I'll say, and I didn't really say this in the write-up, but I think NVIDIA was in a weird spot here. Consumers who read the Tech Report are educated consumers. People who buy these video cards are not all educated consumers in the same way that our readers are. I think you understand that. I mean, that just happens. One thing that people buy video cards on is a key metric. Like, what do they think of? People who are sort of been doing this for a while and aren't really into the deep, detailed stuff, they're like, oh, I want a DirectX 11 card. Like, they think about the DirectX version, right? And then it's like, They look at the numbers, like this is a 980 or this is a 970. Like they're looking at those for relative performance, and then the amount of memory. Like that's an important marketing point in the specs, and I think that NVIDIA made this configuration and they sold it as a 4 gig instead of a 3.5 gig for marketing purposes. And I don't think that you would necessarily like have to have that last half gig of memory in there if you weren't trying to make sure that your specs match the competitor's specs on the store shelf. That's a hard reality, and it may be true. I think it is probably true that this last slow half gig of memory is better to access than going over PCI Express, but it is not the same as a 256-bit 4 gig configuration where everything works in parallel and you get all the sequential data coming streaming in like you would in an optimal situation on a GTX 980. So, I don't know. If I bought one of these, I'd be like frustrated, but I also think it's still the best video card for that for like that segment. Now, these things have changed some because AMD cut prices a whole bunch on the R9 290 recently. Those things are selling for like $269, and they've got some rebates attached. And so, if you don't care that the power consumption is way higher on the R9 290, maybe it's time to buy one of those. But this is just it's a NVIDIA had the world by the tail, and they weren't forthright enough when they launched this product, and now they kind of have a problem.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I've seen things like there's a change.org petition where people want to go after NVIDIA and get some restitution or something. I don't know about that. I mean, maybe you're taking yourself too seriously. I don't know, but it still wasn't great what they did, the way they communicated about this. So I guess people can make their own decisions about that. I'm kind of two minds about it because I think that the marketing stuff has to happen for people who aren't us, and I get it, but it's not my favorite that it happened this way. I don't know.
Yeah.
Jeff and Sarah, what do you guys think?
I mean, as long as the performance is consistent with what we tested, it's interesting academically, and it makes sense maybe to be a little bit upset that there was some miscommunication there, but the performance was pretty clear from the get-go, and if there had been like a serious performance issue that actually reared its head in actual games, the actual games that we tested and the conditions that we tested them, it would have been different. But it's a card that still runs fine, and it's still a good deal for the money. So it could be better, but I don't think it's a bad product. Maybe I'm being too naive, but it just doesn't seem like that big of a deal to me.
You could seek a scenario where maybe there is a performance issue where you wouldn't have it on a full 4 gig regular config. Yeah. That's the thing I think that bothers some people. But maybe you're being a little too OCD about it. Maybe, I don't know. Jeff, what do you think?
I think this is a screw up. I don't think it's not a good thing. This is not sort of on the same level, I think, as some of the other errors that have plagued other chip companies over the years. But they screwed up, and it would maybe be a nice gesture if they did something for people who bought the card. I don't know, give them a game or a free game or something. But I don't think this, quite comes. I wouldn't be calling for a class action lawsuit or anything like that. I might feel compelled to return the card if I found situations where it wasn't performing as I expected it to, especially given the discounts that AMD has. And it sounds like, based on a couple of forum posts, that NVIDIA may be helping people who are trying to return cards that they're not happy with.
Yeah.
So I think if NVIDIA takes care of those people, then it's kind of problem solved for them, and maybe they'll be more careful about this in the future, which is good.
Yeah, they need to be, and I think that the intent behind this was, that they could ship a card that, I mean, this is. I mean, you have to say this is marginally better than if the GTX 970 were a card with 192-bit memory interface, and 3 gigs of RAM. This is marginally better, and that was the intent. But they needed to be clear about the communication. So, yeah, I don't know, man. Here's the problem I have. If I bought a 970 and had it and was using it and I found out about this, like, I wouldn't, like, you can't have it back. Like, I really like the 970s and they're a good product, and I wouldn't want to give it up to get whatever, like, RMA or restitution or anything like that. That's just, I can't imagine actually rage quitting on it because of this. So I don't know. Jordan, you're the PR expert. How do you handle something like this?
You know, it's funny. The whole time I keep thinking about what were the conversations like behind the scenes before you got that phone call.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: when you got the phone call, was it a one-on-one or was it a conference call with a PR person on the line?
Oh no, it was a conference call. Now it was the case that it was actually. I know Jonah Albin. I've asked him questions about every GPU they've launched for several generations, and gotten to sort of quiz him. And he's a smart guy, and I feel like I have enough rapport with him that it was fine. I didn't actually. Nobody interrupted me. He and I talked.
That's good.
And there was none of that, right? And Jonah also, honestly, I think he knew his mission. I think he'd been very well briefed going into this. I actually put into the article some quotations from him verbatim, where he said some things about, hey, we just want people, we think we build a good product. We think this feature is a good one that let us build a better product than we could have otherwise. But we want people to understand exactly how it works. Clearly that he was on message. Right.
Well, that's the other part of it. And as some of you may know, my job very recently was, of course, doing message training and message coaching with executives. So again, the other part that occurs to me is the session that was either had as a quick refresher session. You know, there's a conversation usually happens where it's like, okay, we have a problem happening. We need to get someone on the phone with a journalist. Will they let them? You know, will the journalist, i.e. in this case you, Scott, will it be okay if they talk to a marketing person? No, they're going to want to talk to a developer. Okay, well, who do we have? We have Jonah. All right, well, let's get a quick media training refresher. Let's do that for a quick hour, and then we'll go straight into the media interview. And in the media training, assuming he did it for this particular interview, it's possible that he's just done it before, but they'll probably have someone who sits there and asks him a bunch of tough questions to make sure that he's going to be able to not, give the wrong quote. So I imagine it was just a long string of, well, is it, do you feel like NVIDIA lied here? And isn't this deceitful? And a lot of the sort of more pointed variations of the questions. And clearly he was very practiced in fact, just for kicks, I know we're running long, but just for kicks, Scott, let me just pretend for a second that I'm Jonah. Ask me some really tough questions about the. Let me just give you the media trained version here. This is just for fun. Go ahead and give me some good, just on the nose questions about the accusations people are leveling against NVIDIA.
Well, I mean, I wasn't going on it from that angle, right? I found I found with the tech guys that if you ask the right tech question, they'll admit more to you. And so, like, my question to him was, shouldn't you have just built a 3.5 gig card?
Right.
And
clearly he had the answer for that.
He had an answer for that, which was that this is better than a 3.5 gig card. It's not enough better to justify everything probably, but it is better. I mean, right? But I mean, I guess you'd say, well, you guys advertise this to have 256-bit memory interface, 64 ROPS, 248K of cache. It has none of that. It's clearly not what you said it was. What are you going to do for
when we
people?
conceive this product, we focus on making the best graphics card possible. And it's important to us that we have a relationship with our consumers, that they trust us. And clearly there's a misunderstanding in what came about as we got a little ahead of ourselves, clearly, in the marketing for this product, and are now trying to reevaluate to make sure that we're continuing to make the best graphics cards on the market. That's NVIDIA, by the way, the best graphics. You can quote that. That's the best graphics cards on the market. And just, trust is important to us. And I wouldn't want anyone to feel like there's any, that they can't really just believe that we have the best graphics cards on the market. So yeah, that's what you do.
Am I the only one who wants to buy a 970 right now?
Or if you want to use the politician, you just repeat the person's name a lot. Scott, I hear you. Scott, I know. Scott, I understand. That's something that and I have kids too, and I'd be worried.
Yeah, I remember. I remember the first time I really got to talk to an executive who had a lot of media training.
Yeah.
And it was a super smart guy who you wouldn't expect to know how to do this. It was actually at NVIDIA back in the GeForce FX days. They had launched this car that did not perform up to expectations, and then they had done all these optimizations in their drivers on 3D Mark that reduced image quality to get more performance in the benchmark. And I was like, man, I talked to this guy, and I'm like, what are you doing? This isn't right. And he's like, we just want to have the best. We just want to create the best gaming experience possible for our users. And I was like, oh. And I never encountered that before. It's like trying to kick a marshmallow,
Yeah, exactly.
And it takes time to figure out how you go about having that conversation and getting enlightening answers out of somebody who is trying to be on message. In this case, I didn't think it was super scandalous, but I was able to get him to sort of talk a little about some of the pain points. One thing that is a pain point that I want to mention that I didn't talk about in the article is actually what happens. I'm going to, on the screen here, if people are watching the stream, there's this 1/2 gig partition of memory, and you can see actually the crossbar interface then for this 1/2 gig partition of memory is shared with the 7th memory controller. Supposedly on the chip.
The one that's not working, right?
And well, the one that's not working is on the 8th one, and so it shares the L2 cache and crossbar connect with the 7th one, and the 7th one is supposed to be part of this 3.5 gig lower memory segment, and then you've got this upper memory segment of a 1/2 gig, and it's supposed to be 1/8 the bandwidth on the 1/2 gig and then 7/8 the total bandwidth on the lower portion. The problem with that is that you actually don't have 7/8 worth of bandwidth on the crossbar. You only have, 8/8 worth of bandwidth on the crossbar. You only have 7/8 total. You cannot concurrently access the 1/2 gig and the 3.5 gig at full speed. And the L2 cache for that 1/2 gig one is shared with this 7th memory controller. So the question is, wouldn't it slow down the entire big array to have this configuration if you're accessing the 1/2 gig, splitting the cache, and sharing the crossbar? And I asked Jonah about that, and he was kind of like he didn't really give me a good answer. And I didn't press as hard as I should have. I was working hard trying to get notes and trying to understand it. And I wish I'd like to circle back on that. But honestly, I think that this config is probably less than ideal for this 1/2 gig of memory, in part because they had to sacrifice to make sure that the 3.5 gig portion got priority. I would assume that's what their logic looks like. And without as much cache, without its own dedicated crossbar, that's going to be slower than 1/8. That's my take on it. So I don't know. It's not the end of the world, but it's interesting. There's a question in the chat room. Was this an intentional design decision, or was this a way to use chips that didn't test to 980 standards? I think the answer to both is yes. It's not an either or. This was an intentional design decision born out of the experience they had with the GK104 and prior chips, where they figured out a way to disable selectively a portion of the chip and not have to disable as much as they would have in past designs. So Maxwell architecture has this provision built in, and it is to deal with exactly this scenario where you have some L2 cache that doesn't work right. Anyway, I think, Jordan, we probably should go ahead and take questions from the chat now.
That's exactly what I was about to suggest. We are of the same mind, and I have two that I'm going to ask quickly here from Junior Damage's very generous and diligent collection work, and then we can answer some more immediately. The first here is from Power666. That's a satanic name. With the multiple displays and multiple GPUs, would it be feasible to run each display fully asynchronously from each other, i.e. GPU 1 drives display 1 and GPU drives display 2, etc.?
I haven't played around with that in 3D games. You can definitely do some of those configs, but I've only seen it in display wall configurations and things like that. If you look at AMD's Eyefinity or NVIDIA's surround stuff, they usually think of displays as arrays, and the goal is to build a single large surface out of tiles to let you game. And so there are configurations that will allow you to do, like, plug some displays into GPU 1 and some into GPU 2. But I'm not sure about like independently allocating. Like, I don't think DirectX until maybe fairly recently has allowed you to independently allocate like 2 GPUs to drive 2 displays in 2 separate applications. It's not fundamentally like multi-user in that way or multi-whatever in that way. That stuff is maybe kind of happening in and around the virtualization things that are going on now. Since like GK104, NVIDIA has had some virtualization capability built into its GPUs where you can have multiple users accessing the same device. But man, I'm not aware of the config that he's speaking of for like 3D gaming where you run like separate games independently. For just display walls, sure.
Other question here from Tardon BC. Will you be able to downgrade from Windows 10 if you don't like it?
Me personally, sure. I just got a backup image. Everybody else, I don't know what the answer is, right?
Operating systems traditionally, with these, no, there's no exceptions, are just hard to downgrade.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be more of a licensing issue than anything else, right? If you're going to, if you upgrade to Windows 10 and you activate and you say, hey, I'm trading this Windows 7 license for my free upgrade to Windows 10, and then at some point you decide you don't like Windows 10, you want to go back to Windows 7, I think that gets hard because you've already traded in your Windows 7 license for the upgrade. So yeah, I don't know. In some of those cases, you might be able to call Microsoft and ask nicely and get them to change your status. But I think it would probably go to that level of contact in order to get that done. But, I think you've got to wait and see, too, what Microsoft does, because their policy on stuff like that changes with every OS release.
Well, we don't even know what the upgrade process is going to be like either for something like Windows 7, where if you're going to have to sort of wipe your system, or whether it'll be a sort of smooth incremental upgrade that you can just kind of apply. Yeah.
So, I don't know, man. When I upgraded like from Windows 8 to 8.1, I think it would be harder to do a downgrade from that than almost anything that mankind has achieved in all of its history. Did you guys go through that process? It didn't feel like I could back out afterward.
Yeah, they definitely lock you in. The last question here from the comments from the chat room is, hi guys, is there any news on Broadwell K release dates?
I don't know. Cyril, did you do a story on that?
I don't think so, no.
Oh, you guys are helpful.
I heard rumors about like it's just not going to happen.
No, I think it's going to happen. It's just...
I just heard rumors that it wasn't.
I think if it does, it's probably going to be sort of Computex timeframe, sort of around June, because traditionally what's happened is that every year around that time there's a new wave of Intel motherboards. So if anything, I would expect it around then, just so the motherboard guys have something new to talk about. But
yeah, I think they said like mid 2015 for over 45 watts, and I think that included desktop.
Yeah. Here's another one, Jordan. Do you think virtual reality will drive sales as GPUs, CPUs to the point where companies shift their main focus back onto the desktop market? I don't think anything will make Intel shift its main focus back onto the desktop market, short of like the apocalypse. You go to any Intel presentation and they talk about all their markets, and they show you laptops and servers and mobile devices and wearables, and there's never a tower case. If there's a desktop they talk about, it's an all-in-one or a NUC, which is a little mini thing. Like in Intel's vision of the current, not just the future, but the current, the desktop PC as we know it, the do-it-yourself box, does not exist. Like that doesn't. The reason they focus on that is when AMD takes significant market share away from them with Zen. Right? Until that happens, they aren't going to change. and they'll sell it. They could sell a ton of processors. They keep selling a ton of processors. PC gaming is extremely lucrative for Intel. It doesn't mean that their leadership is going to focus on it. NVIDIA is paying attention now. They sold, like I said, I think nearly 2 million GM204 based cards since they launched them in October. I don't think that you could say that Jensen and the founder of NVIDIA, who's still the CEO and the kind of one guy in charge, is not paying attention. AMD, they're working on these 300 series Radeons apparently. They're in a bit of a difficult situation where they're trying to turn themselves around and become a different company and not have to compete directly with Intel to win. But they're serious about their Radeon business, and they've had some trouble, I think, moving cards. But their answer lately has been cutting prices like crazy, and you should be looking at an R9 290 if you haven't upgraded recently and you were thinking about a GTX 970. You should at least be looking at those because they're super cheap right now. But I think AMD will continue to pay attention to the desktop, although they're making less noise on that front now under Lisa Su than they did under Rory Reid. They've had a CEO transition. But I just don't feel like that a vast success of VR changes the math on any of that stuff, because we've already have vast successes in PC gaming for like the last few years. It's been amazing. The sales are amazing. The money is there. And if they're not paying attention now, it's their own fault. And I don't think anything changes that. Not like more sales.
All right, guys, let's do a little bit of choose your own adventure. We can talk about 840 EVOs that are vulnerable to read speed slowdowns, and we could talk about NVIDIA's GTX 960 graphics card.
Let's talk EVOs.
No graphics card tonight?
I've talked a lot about graphics cards, and
that's true.
Jeff has something to tell us, so let's talk about
it. After their 970 shenanigans, maybe NVIDIA can take a timeout for this episode. It's like in bad NVIDIA, you go in the corner. People can read your article. We're not going to read it to them.
Here's what I'll say. Here's what I'll say, Jordan. The 960 is an interesting product that I am going to be covering more, so we can talk about it next time.
Excellent. Jeff, let's talk about what's wrong with the EVOs.
Well, it's kind of a story of what may still be wrong with the EVOs. So this summer, a bunch of people kind of discovered, I don't know if this started in forums or on Reddit, but they discovered that the 840 EVO, which is Samsung's second generation SSD based on TLC NAND, was delivering much slower read speeds with data that had been on the drive for a while. Now, if you wrote fresh data, the read speeds would be fine, but stuff that had been around for a few months was substantially slower, and in some cases even slower than what you get on a mechanical hard drive. So this sort of circulated for a while. Samsung looked into it. They said they found the cause of the problem, which was related to the fact that when you store information in NAND memory, it's basically stored in these electrons inside individual memory cells. And what happens over time is that you get a little bit of drift in the voltage of the cell. So the voltage that you set it at is not the same voltage when you go back to read it. And how they were compensating for that was not effective, which was causing the slowdown when reading the cell, because they have to read it a bunch of times before we get it correct. So they issued a fix in October and said, we found the problem, everything is good. And a couple of weeks, well, I guess about a week and a half ago, I got one email and then I got another one saying that this issue had cropped up again, that some people in the overclock.net forums had found the same kind of slowdowns with this patched version or patched firmware that Samsung issued that was existing on the original EVOs. So I did some investigating myself with a drive that I actually had loaded up with files in October and just kind of put on the shelf to test whether or not this firmware fix was working. And the intention was at some point pull it off the shelf, test the read speeds. At that point, the data would be old and see what happens. So I did, and the read speeds were really slow. I got 35 megabytes per second. Average on this drive, which is it's slower than like a 5400 RPM notebook drive. And all these files were all 15 weeks old at the time. I used another tool called SSD read speed tester, which someone actually came up with specifically to test this issue. That also gave me a low average. The average was about 54 megabytes per second. So basically much, much lower performance than you would expect from the drive. So then what I did is I copied all the data off the drive and loaded the exact same files back onto it. And the fresh speeds were way higher. We're talking, like 400 to 500 megabytes per second. Exact same drive, exact same files, kind of like minutes apart doing this testing. So on this drive, clearly a problem. Contacted Samsung about it. We still haven't heard back from them about the issue. It does seem to be something that's a little more inconsistent than the original problem. Some people are having problems and posting screenshots and evidence that they are seeing slowdowns with older data, but other people who have applied the patch and have a bunch of old files on their PCs are not seeing it. I was actually emailing back and forth a little bit with Alan from PC Perspective, who had also put some drives on the shelf, and he said that he was seeing slowdowns, but not nearly the same amount of a slowdown that I was getting. So enough that there was a problem, but not the same degree of a problem that I observed. So it does seem like a kind of issue that may have some sort of variance from drive to drive, which would make sense if this all comes down to sort of how well individual memory cells are holding their charge over time. So it's kind of a live issue right now, and we're sort of waiting on Samsung for a response on what's going on here. But it does look like the Evo fix is probably not completely fixed at this point.
Yikes.
So yeah, that's kind of sucks. I mean, that problem is a popular drive that they sold millions of. I mean, Samsung actually has made a point of talking about how many of these drives that they've sold. This was their mass market drive. And there may also be problems with the old 840 series, which was their original TLC drive. Samsung has kind of stonewalled us a little bit on providing answers for the reports that some people are, again, experiencing the same kind of issues with those drives. So it does seem to be something that's more related to TLC NAND than NMLC.
Kind of hate ending the podcast on a kind of a down note. Let's talk more about Elon Musk. So,
inspire us, Jordan.
No, but that does bring us. One more question.
We'll get another question. Oh, okay.
I guess we can answer.
Yeah, Samsung makes their own TLC NAND. Just to answer the question in the comments.
Yeah. Well, the question I'm looking at here is from Captain Ned. He says, "Can AMD live solely off the console biz?" No, they can't. Okay, good night.
I no, but they could live. They're talking like they could live off of semi-custom chips solely. The question is, who else is a customer other than Sony and Microsoft? But if they got the right suite of customers, maybe
Nintendo.
Well, I mean Nintendo, yeah, but I mean they got to have somebody else. But look, I mean they're a lot smaller company now. It's the possibilities that are open to them are different than they were in the past. But it would stink to give up, especially Radeon on the desktop. That would be terrible.
That would be terrible. And on that note, we'll see you on the next episode. You can check us out in our show notes if you want to get our Twitter handles, if you want to, I don't know, just find out, click the links to some of the stories that we talked about. If you want to read some of my really delicious and witty prose, techreport.com. It's the place to do it. And in the meantime, email me, jdrake at the Tech Report. jdrake at techreport.com. Boy, if you want to have your question answered on the show. Otherwise, we'll see you on the next episode. I'm Jordan Drake for the rest of the team at the Tech Report for the Tech Report podcast saying so long.